The blood on Sarah Mitchell's skirts told everyone in Silver Creek, Montana territory, the same cruel story they had whispered for 3 years running, and as she walked past the general store in the spring of 1874, their pitying glances cut deeper than any knife. She kept her chin high despite the cramping pain in her belly, despite the fresh loss that marked her 4th miscarriage in as many years of marriage to Thomas Mitchell. The doctor had been kind but firm when he had visited their small ranch house that morning, his words gentle yet devastating as he explained what Sarah already knew in her heart. The damage from the fever she had survived as a young woman, combined with the repeated losses, meant her body would likely never carry a child to term. Thomas had stood silent in the doorway, his face unreadable, before walking out without a word. Now, 3 days later, Sarah moved through the town with practiced dignity, purchasing flour and sugar, needles and thread, pretending she could not hear the women clustering near the pickle barrels. Their voices carried regardless of her pretense. "Poor Thomas Mitchell," Adelaide Hornsby said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "A man needs sons to work his land, to carry on his name. What good is a wife who cannot give him that?" "I heard Dr. Patterson told them there would be no children at all," Constance Wright added. "She cannot give him the strong sons he needs. My Henry says Thomas should consider his options." Sarah's fingers tightened on the bag of flour, but she completed her transaction with the shopkeeper, paid her money, and walked out into the bright April sunshine. The town nestled in a valley between towering mountains, their peaks still white with snow despite the warming temperatures below. She had always loved this place, had come here as a bride full of hope and dreams. Now those dreams lay shattered like the delicate china teacup she had dropped the morning of her first loss. The ride back to the ranch took nearly an hour, her mare picking her way along the muddy road with careful steps. Sarah let her mind wander to the early days of her marriage, when Thomas had seemed kind, when his ambitions for a large family had matched her own desires. But kindness, she had learned, often depended on circumstances. When those circumstances changed, so too did the man. She found Thomas in the barn, forking hay to their small herd of cattle. He barely glanced at her when she entered, his broad shoulders tense beneath his work shirt. "We need to talk," Sarah said quietly, setting down the supplies she carried. "Nothing to talk about." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Thomas, please. I know this is not what either of us wanted, but we can still have a good life together. There are other ways to find help with the ranch. We could hire hands, or perhaps in time we might consider adoption." He turned on her then, his face twisted with anger and something worse, contempt. "Adoption? You want me to raise another man's bastard because you cannot do the one thing a wife is supposed to do?" The words struck her like physical blows, but Sarah stood her ground. "I am still your wife. I work this ranch beside you every day. I cook and clean and mend and tend to everything that needs doing. I am more than a vessel for children." "Are you?" Thomas threw down the pitchfork, the clatter echoing in the barn. "Because from where I stand, you are a broken thing taking up space in my house and my bed. My father built this ranch with his own hands, and he had 5 sons to help him do it. I have nothing, no sons, no future, just a barren wife and land I will break my back working alone." Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "Then what do you want from me, Thomas? Tell me plainly." He looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw the death of whatever affection had once existed between them. "I want you gone. I have already spoken to a lawyer in Helena. We can have the marriage dissolved on grounds of your inability to fulfill your marital duties. You can return to your people in St. Louis." "I have no people in St. Louis," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My parents are dead. I have no siblings. This is my home." "Not anymore." Thomas picked up the pitchfork again, dismissing her. "I will give you 1 month to make arrangements. After that, I want you off my property." Sarah walked back to the house in a daze, her mind struggling to comprehend how completely her life had collapsed. 1 month. 30 days to figure out where a woman alone could go in this wild territory, how she could survive without money or family or prospects. The laws favored men in matters of divorce, especially when the cause was a wife's failure to produce children. She would leave with nothing but the clothes on her back and whatever small items Thomas deemed she could take. That night, she lay in the small bedroom that had been hers since Thomas had stopped sharing her bed after the third miscarriage. She stared at the ceiling and tried to formulate a plan. She had a little money saved from selling eggs and preserves in town, perhaps enough for a stagecoach ticket to somewhere larger, somewhere she might find work as a seamstress or a cook. The thought of leaving Montana, of abandoning the mountains and the wide sky, made her heart ache. But what choice did she have? The days that followed were a blur of quiet humiliation. Thomas barely spoke to her except to remind her of the ticking clock. The ranch hands, 2 young men who helped during spring calving, treated her with awkward pity. In town, the gossip spread like wildfire. Sarah Mitchell was being cast aside, thrown away like a broken tool. Some women clucked their tongues in sympathy, but others nodded approvingly, saying Thomas had every right to seek a proper wife. Sarah bore it all with as much grace as she could muster, but the weight of judgment and failure pressed down on her shoulders until she felt she might collapse beneath it. She began packing her few belongings, sorting through the simple dresses and undergarments, the Bible her mother had given her, the small daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. So little to show for 25 years of life. 2 weeks into her month of exile, Sarah was in town again, this time to inquire about stagecoach schedules. She stood outside the express office, gathering her courage to go inside and ask about fares to Denver or Salt Lake City, when a commotion down the street caught her attention. A man emerged from the trading post, and even at a distance, Sarah could tell he was unlike anyone she had seen in Silver Creek before. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the doorway. He wore buckskin trousers and a heavy coat despite the warming weather, and his dark hair fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed. A thick beard covered the lower half of his face, but even that could not hide the strong jaw and the striking features. He carried himself with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, moving through the street as if he owned it, as if the civilization of the town was something foreign and slightly amusing to him. "That's shy." "That is Nathaniel Cross," a voice said beside her, and Sarah turned to find Martha Peterson, one of the kinder women in town, standing nearby. "He is a mountain man, comes down from the high country twice a year to trade furs and buy supplies. Keeps to himself mostly, but Lord help anyone who crosses him. I heard he killed 3 men up in the Bitterroots who tried to steal his furs." Sarah watched as Nathaniel Cross loaded supplies onto a pack mule, his movements efficient and powerful. Even from a distance, she could see the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the raw strength in his arms and back. He was a man built for survival, for wrestling a living from the harsh wilderness, and something about that strength called to a deep part of her she had not known existed. "Why does he come to town if he lives in the mountains?" Sarah asked, surprised by her own curiosity. "He has a cabin somewhere up in the high country, maybe a day's ride from here," Martha said. "Traps beaver and fox, hunts elk. They say he is the best tracker in the territory, knows the mountains better than any Indian. He helped the sheriff find that lost child last winter, brought the boy back alive when everyone else had given up hope." As if sensing their attention, Nathaniel Cross looked up, his gaze sweeping across the street. For a brief moment, his eyes met Sarah's, and she felt a jolt run through her, like touching a live wire. His eyes were the color of a winter storm, gray and penetrating, and they seemed to see straight through her carefully maintained composure to the fear and desperation beneath. Then he looked away, returning to his work, and Sarah released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "You stay away from that one," Martha warned, though her tone was more concerned than judgmental. "A man like that is not for the likes of decent women. He is wild, untamed. They say he has Indian blood, though nobody knows for sure. He's not the marrying kind, if you understand my meaning." Sarah understood perfectly, and the warning only made her more curious. But she nodded politely and made her way into the express office, where she learned that a ticket to Denver would cost nearly all her savings, leaving her nothing to live on once she arrived. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles, looked at her with the same pitying expression everyone seemed to wear these days. She left the office feeling more hopeless than before. The mountains rose all around the town, beautiful and indifferent to her troubles, and for the first time since Thomas had delivered his ultimatum, Sarah felt tears spilling down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away and ducked into the alley beside the general store, not wanting to give the gossips more ammunition. "You all right, madam?" The deep voice startled her, and Sarah looked up to find Nathaniel Cross standing at the mouth of the alley, his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Up close, he was even more imposing, his presence filling the narrow space. She could smell wood smoke and leather, pine and something wild and earthy that made her think of the forest after rain. "I am fine," she managed, though her voice shook slightly. "Just some dust in my eyes." He studied her for a long moment, and Sarah had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see through her lie as easily as he could track a deer through the woods. "You are Thomas Mitchell's wife," he said finally. It was not a question. "I am." Sarah straightened her spine, lifting her chin. "Do you know my husband?" "Met him once. Did not care for him." Nathaniel's blunt assessment surprised a small, startled laugh out of her, and something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, or amusement. "Word around town is he's casting you off." The laughter died in Sarah's throat. "The word around town should mind its own business." "Probably should," Nathaniel agreed. "But it rarely does." He shifted his weight, and Sarah noticed he wore a large knife at his belt, the handle worn smooth from use. "Where will you go?" "I do not see how that concerns you, Mr. Cross." "It does not," he admitted, "but I am asking anyway." Sarah did not know what possessed her to answer honestly. Perhaps it was the strange kindness in his gruff manner, or the way he looked at her without pity, just straightforward curiosity. "I do not know. I have enough money for a stagecoach ticket, but not enough to survive once I reach a city. I thought perhaps I could find work somewhere, but—" She trailed off, the impossibility of her situation settling over her again like a heavy blanket. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the mountains rising beyond the town. When he looked back at her, something had shifted in his expression, a decision made. "I need someone to help me at my cabin for the summer season, curing hides, preserving meat, tending a garden. The work is hard and the cabin is remote, but I pay fair wages. By the time the snow comes, you would have enough saved to go wherever you wanted, start fresh." Sarah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "You are offering me work? At your cabin, alone with you in the mountains?" "I'm offering you an option," Nathaniel corrected. "Better than going to a city with empty pockets, seems to me. But it is your choice." "Mr. Cross, I appreciate the offer, but surely you understand how such an arrangement would look. An unmarried woman living alone with a man." "You are getting divorced anyway," Nathaniel interrupted. "Your reputation is already in tatters from what I hear. Seems to me you have two choices. Go to a city where you know no one and have nothing, or come work for me for a few months and leave with enough money to make a real start somewhere. I am not offering anything improper. You would have your own room, your own space. I just need the help." "Why?" Sarah asked bluntly. "Why would you help me?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he would not answer. Then he said quietly, "Because I know what it is like to be judged for something beyond your control. And because you look like you could use a friend. Even if that friend is a rough mountain man the town thinks is half savage." Sarah's heart was pounding, her mind racing through the implications. It was madness to even consider his offer. Going alone into the wilderness with a man she did not know, a man who by all accounts was dangerous and wild. It went against every rule of proper society. But then, proper society had already judged her and found her wanting. Proper society was casting her out with nothing, leaving her to fend for herself in a world that offered women few options and less mercy. "I need time to think," she said finally. Nathaniel nodded once. "I leave in 3 days, at first light. If you want to come, meet me at the north end of town by the old oak tree. Bring what you can carry on horseback, nothing more." He turned to leave, then paused. "And madam? Whatever you decide, you deserve better than what this town and that husband of yours have given you. I hope you know that." He walked away before she could respond, his long strides carrying him quickly down the street. Sarah remained in the alley, her mind spinning. She thought of Thomas's cold dismissal, of the women whispering behind their hands, of the empty future stretching before her if she took that stagecoach to Denver. Then she thought of the mountains, of honest work and fair wages, of a chance to heal away from the judging eyes of Silver Creek. The decision, she realized, was already made. She returned to the ranch and said nothing to Thomas about Nathaniel's offer. Instead, she continued her preparations, packing her belongings with more care now, selecting sturdy work dresses instead of her nicer Sunday clothes, practical boots instead of delicate slippers. She packed her mother's Bible, a few precious photographs, her sewing kit, and the small amount of money she had saved. Everything fit into 2 saddlebags and a small trunk that could be tied to a horse. On her last night at the ranch, Thomas came to her room. He stood in the doorway, his expression uncertain in the lamplight. "I heard you were asking about stagecoach tickets," he said. "I was. I will be leaving in the morning." He nodded, relief crossing his features. "That's good. That's for the best. Sarah, I want you to know this is not personal. I need a wife who can give me children. Surely you understand that." Sarah looked at the man she had married, the man she had once thought she loved, and felt nothing but a vast emptiness. "I understand that you are a coward, Thomas. I understand that when times became difficult, you chose the easy path of blame rather than standing beside me. I understand that you value land and legacy more than the vows you made before God. So yes, I understand you perfectly." His face reddened with anger. "You have no right to judge me. I am within my legal rights." "Legal rights," Sarah interrupted, "are not the same as moral ones. But you are correct about one thing. It is best that I leave. I deserve a better life than the one you are offering, and I intend to find it." She turned her back on him, making it clear the conversation was over. After a moment, she heard his footsteps retreating down the hall, and then the sound of the front door closing. Thomas would spend the night in the bunkhouse with the Hands, as he had done most nights since deciding to end their marriage. Sarah did not sleep. She spent the dark hours making final preparations, writing a short letter to the minister's wife who had been kind to her, and watching the stars wheel slowly across the sky beyond her window. When the first gray light of dawn touched the mountains, Sarah saddled her mare, a gentle chestnut named Clover that Thomas had grudgingly agreed she could take. She tied her trunk and saddlebags securely, took one last look at the ranch house that had been her home, and rode toward town without looking back. The old oak tree at the north end of Silver Creek was massive, its branches spreading wide over the road. Nathaniel Cross was already there, sitting astride a massive black horse that looked wild enough to match its rider. 2 pack mules stood patiently nearby, loaded with supplies and furs. He nodded when he saw her approach, his expression unreadable beneath the brim of his worn hat. "Was not sure you would come." "I was not sure either," Sarah admitted, "but here I am." "Here you are," he agreed. He studied her for a moment, then asked, "You know how to handle a rifle?" "My father taught me to shoot when I was young." "Good. The mountains are beautiful, but they are not always kind. You will need to know how to protect yourself." He reached into one of the packs and pulled out a rifle, handing it to her along with a leather pouch of ammunition. "This is yours now. We will practice when we get to the cabin." Sarah took the weapon, feeling the weight of it in her hands, the reality of what she was doing settling over her. She was riding into the wilderness with a stranger, leaving behind everything familiar. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "There is still time to change your mind," Nathaniel said quietly. "No shame in it if you do." Sarah met his gray eyes and saw genuine concern there, not judgment. It was more kindness than anyone in Silver Creek had shown her in weeks. "I'm not changing my mind. Let us go before the whole town wakes up and provides them with more gossip for their breakfast tables." A smile tugged at the corner of Nathaniel's mouth, the first real expression of emotion she had seen from him. "Fair enough. Stay close and follow my lead. The trail can be tricky if you do not know it." They rode out as the sun rose over the mountains, painting the peaks in shades of gold and pink. The town fell away behind them quickly, replaced by dense pine forests and rocky trails that climbed steadily upward. Nathaniel set a steady pace, neither too fast nor too slow, and Sarah found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride. The morning was cool and fresh, filled with birdsong and the rustle of wind through the trees. They crossed crystal streams and skirted meadows where deer grazed in the early light. Nathaniel pointed out landmarks and trails, teaching her the geography of this wild country as they rode. He spoke sparingly, but with knowledge, showing her where to find water, how to read the signs of weather in the clouds gathering around the peaks, which plants were safe to eat and which to avoid. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of bread and dried meat. Sarah sat on a fallen log and looked back the way they had come. Silver Creek was long out of sight, hidden by distance in the folding ridges of the mountains. She felt as if she had crossed into a different world, one where the rules and judgments of civilization held no power. "You doing all right?" Nathaniel asked, offering her a canteen of cold water. "Better than I expected," Sarah said honestly. "How much further to your cabin?" "Another 4 hours or so. The trail gets steeper from here." He hesitated, then said, "I want you to understand something, Sarah. When I offered you this work, I meant what I said. You will have your own space, your own privacy. I'm not looking for anything beyond help with the work and maybe some decent cooking. I know how to fend for myself, but I have never been much good with a frying pan." Sarah felt some of the tension she had been carrying ease at his directness. "I appreciate you making that clear, Nathaniel, and I promise I will earn my keep. I am a hard worker." "I do not doubt it." He stood and began checking the pack mule's loads, adjusting straps and ropes with practiced efficiency. Anyone who can survive what you have been through and still keep their head high has more than enough strength for mountain work. They rode on through the afternoon, climbing higher into country so beautiful it made Sarah's chest ache. The trees thinned out as they ascended, replaced by wide alpine meadows dotted with wildflowers. Mountain peaks rose all around them, their snow-covered summits bright against the deep blue sky. She saw elk grazing in a distant valley, their antlers like small forests, and once a golden eagle soaring on the thermal currents high above. The trail became narrower and steeper, forcing them to ride single file with Nathaniel leading the way. Sarah's thighs burned from gripping the saddle, and her back ached from the long hours of riding, but she bit back any complaints. She had chosen this path, and she would see it through. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, they crested a final ridge, and Sarah caught her first glimpse of Nathaniel's cabin. It sat in a high mountain valley, sheltered on 3 sides by dense forest, and open to the south, where a clear stream rushed past. The cabin itself was larger than she had expected, built from solid logs with a steep roof to shed snow and a wide porch across the front. Smoke rose from the stone chimney, and Sarah realized someone must have been there recently. "I came up last week to open it up for the season," Nathaniel explained, seeing her curious look. "Got the stove going, aired it out, made sure no bears had moved in over the winter." They rode down into the valley as twilight gathered in the trees. Chickadees called from the branches, and somewhere nearby Sarah could hear the musical sound of water over rocks. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke, clean and sharp in her lungs. Nathaniel dismounted and came to help her down from Clover. Sarah's legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, stiff from the long ride, but Nathaniel's strong hand steadied her. "Come on inside," he said. "I will tend to the horses and bring your things in. You should rest." The cabin's interior was simple but surprisingly comfortable. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a well-made table and chairs nearby. Shelves held supplies and equipment, and furs covered the plank floor. A curtain divided off one end of the cabin, and Nathaniel gestured toward it. "That's your room. Not much, but it has a good bed and a window. Privacy curtain is thick enough to give you space." Sarah stepped behind the curtain and found a small but adequate room with a narrow bed covered in quilts, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a trunk for storage. A single window looked out toward the stream and the meadow beyond. It was spare, but it was clean and private, and after the emotional battering of the past weeks, it felt like a sanctuary. When she emerged, Nathaniel had brought in her trunk and saddlebags. He stood by the stove, adding wood to the fire. "You get settled," he said. "I will make some coffee and start supper. Tomorrow we will talk about the work and how things will run, but tonight you just need to rest and recover from the ride." Sarah wanted to protest, to insist on helping, but exhaustion was pulling at her with heavy hands. She nodded gratefully and retreated to her small room, where she unpacked a few necessities and changed out of her dusty riding clothes. When she came back out, Nathaniel had coffee boiling and was frying salt pork and potatoes in a large skillet. They ate in companionable silence, too tired for conversation. The food was simple but satisfying, and Sarah found herself hungrier than she had been in weeks. The stress of her failing marriage had stolen her appetite, but here in the mountains, with miles between her and Silver Creek, she felt something loosening in her chest, a knot of tension beginning to unravel. After supper, Sarah insisted on washing the dishes while Nathaniel went out to check on the horses one final time. She stood at the dry sink, her hands in warm water, and looked out at the darkening valley. Stars were beginning to appear in the deep blue sky, more stars than she had ever seen, brilliant and close in the clear mountain air. An owl called from the forest, its voice haunting and beautiful, and Sarah felt tears prickling behind her eyes. But these were different from the tears she had shed in Silver Creek. These felt like release, like grief mixed with something that might, eventually, become hope. Nathaniel came back inside, bringing the smell of night air and pine. "You should get some sleep," he said gently. "Tomorrow will be a full day." Sarah nodded and bid him good night, slipping behind the curtain to her small room. She lay in the narrow bed, wrapped in quilts that smelled of cedar and lavender, and listened to the sounds of Nathaniel moving around the cabin, banking the fire, settling in for the night. She heard the creak of rope and wood as he climbed into what must be his own bed on the other side of the curtain, heard his breathing slow and deepen into sleep. For the first time in months, Sarah felt safe. She was alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, miles from civilization, and yet she felt safer than she had in her own home with her own husband. The irony was not lost on her, but she was too tired to examine it. Sleep claimed her quickly, pulling her down into darkness filled with dreams of eagles and mountains and eyes the color of winter storms. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that Sarah found deeply satisfying. She woke each morning to the sound of Nathaniel building up the fire, the smell of coffee strong in the cool air. They would eat a simple breakfast together, and then Nathaniel would outline the day's work while they sipped their coffee and watched the sun climb over the eastern peaks. The work was indeed hard, as he had warned. Sarah learned to scrape and cure hides, a messy and difficult process that left her arms aching and her hands raw despite the gloves Nathaniel provided. She tended the large garden he had planted behind the cabin, weeding and watering, marveling at how quickly things grew in the mountain summer. She learned to preserve meat by smoking and salting, to gather wild berries and herbs, to fish in the stream for trout that flashed silver and pink in the clear water. Nathaniel proved to be a patient teacher, showing her tasks once, then trusting her to complete them. He never hovered or criticized, but he was quick with praise when she did something well. Sarah found herself working harder than she ever had on the ranch, but it was different here. Every task had a clear purpose. Every bit of work contributed directly to their survival and comfort. There was a satisfaction in that she had never felt before. In the evenings, they would eat together and talk. At first, the conversations were simple, limited to discussions of work and weather. But gradually, as they grew more comfortable with each other, the talks deepened. Nathaniel told her about his life in the mountains, how he'd come west 10 years ago after the war, seeking solitude and a way to live that did not involve the violence and cruelty he had witnessed. He spoke little of the war itself, but Sarah could see the shadows it had left in his eyes. "I had a wife once," he said one night, the admission surprising her. They sat on the porch, watching the last light fade from the sky. "Back in Ohio before the war. She died of cholera while I was away fighting. By the time I got word and made it home, she had been in the ground for 2 months. Her family blamed me for not being there, and maybe they were right. After that, I could not stay in that place, surrounded by reminders of what I had lost. So I came west and kept going until I found these mountains. Been here ever since." "I am sorry," Sarah said softly. "What was her name?" "Elizabeth. She was gentle and kind, liked to sing while she worked. You remind me of her sometimes, the way you keep your dignity no matter what life throws at you." Sarah did not know what to say to that, so she simply reached over and squeezed his hand. His fingers, rough and calloused from years of hard work, curled around hers for a moment before releasing. It was a brief touch, but it sent warmth spreading through Sarah's chest, a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. As the weeks passed, Sarah noticed changes in herself. Her hands grew stronger, her muscles harder. The soft town woman who had ridden up the mountain was being replaced by someone tougher, more capable. She could chop wood now without getting winded, could carry water from the stream without stopping to rest. Her skin bronzed from the sun despite her bonnet, and her eyes grew clearer, brighter. But more than the physical changes, there was something shifting inside her. The weight of shame and failure that had pressed down on her in Silver Creek was lifting, blown away by the mountain wind. Here, her worth was not measured by her ability to bear children or by how well she conformed to society's expectations. Here, she was valued for her work, her competence, her companionship. Nathaniel treated her with a respect that Thomas never had, listening when she spoke, considering her opinions, acknowledging her contributions. And Sarah was falling in love with him. She tried to deny it at first, telling herself it was simply gratitude, the natural affection one might feel for someone who had shown kindness in a time of need. But she could not lie to herself for long. It was there in the way her heart lifted when she heard his footsteps on the porch, in the way she found excuses to work near him, in the way she caught herself watching him when he was not looking, admiring the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the strength in his hands, the sharp intelligence in his gray eyes. She loved the way he moved through the world with quiet confidence, never wasting energy on posturing or pretense. She loved his dry sense of humor, the way a rare smile transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. She loved his gentleness with the horses and his fierce protectiveness of this valley he called home. She loved the way he saw her, not as a failure or a disappointment, but simply as Sarah, a woman with strengths and weaknesses like any other. But she had no idea if he felt anything similar. Nathaniel was unfailingly respectful, maintaining a careful distance between them even as they worked and talked and shared their days. He never touched her except when necessary, never let his gaze linger too long, never said anything that might indicate his feelings went beyond simple friendship and professional regard. Sarah told herself it was for the best. She was still technically married, though the divorce proceedings were moving forward in Helena. She had come here to work, to save money, to figure out her next steps. Falling in love with her employer was not part of the plan, and even if Nathaniel did share her feelings, where could it lead? She would leave when the snow came, as they had agreed, and Nathaniel would remain here in his mountain sanctuary, alone as he had been before she arrived. The thought of leaving filled her with a sadness so profound it shocked her. Somewhere in the midst of hard work and simple living, this remote valley had become home. The cabin with its smoking chimney and wide porch, the stream with its constant music, the meadow where wildflowers nodded in the breeze, all of it had woven itself into her heart, and Nathaniel, with his quiet strength and unexpected kindness, had woven himself even deeper. Summer reached its peak, the days long and warm, the nights cool and star-bright. Sarah's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables for their meals and extras to preserve for winter. Nathaniel brought home elk and deer from his hunts, and Sarah learned to butcher and preserve the meat, wasting nothing. Their stores grew steadily, the shelves filling with jars of berries and pickled vegetables, the smokehouse heavy with hanging meat. One afternoon in late July, Nathaniel came back from checking his trap lines with news. "There is a storm building," he said, scanning the sky where dark clouds were massing over the western peaks. "A big one, from the look of it. We should secure everything and get the stock into the shelter." They worked quickly, Sarah helping to drive the horses and mules into the lean-to stable Nathaniel had built against the cabin. They brought in extra wood, filled water barrels, and shuttered the windows. By the time they finished, the wind was rising, whipping through the valley with increasing force. The storm hit just after dark, a fury of wind and rain that battered the cabin and turned the stream into a roaring torrent. Thunder crashed overhead, so close and loud that Sarah could feel it in her bones. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the valley in brief, brilliant flashes. Sarah sat by the fire, trying to focus on the sock she was darning, but her hands shook with each crack of thunder. She had never liked storms, not since a tornado had destroyed her neighbor's barn when she was a child, and this one was unlike anything she had experienced. The wind shrieked around the cabin's eaves, and rain lashed against the walls with a sound like thrown gravel. Nathaniel sat at the table, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision, seemingly unbothered by the tempest raging outside. But he glanced at her occasionally, and when a particularly loud thunderclap made her jump and drop her darning, he set aside his work and moved to sit beside her on the bench near the fire. "The cabin has weathered worse storms than this," he said quietly. "It will hold." "I know," Sarah said, trying to steady her voice. "I'm just being foolish." "Fear is not foolish. It is how we respond to it that matters." Nathaniel hesitated, then added, "Would it help if I told you about the time I got caught in a blizzard up in the Bitterroots? Made this storm look like a Sunday shower." Sarah managed a small smile. "I would like to hear that." Nathaniel began to talk, his deep voice steady and calming beneath the storm's roar. He told her about tracking a mountain lion through deep snow, about getting caught when the weather turned suddenly, about finding shelter in a cave and waiting out 3 days of howling wind and blinding snow. He made it into a story, emphasizing the absurd moments and his own mistakes, making her laugh despite her fear. Gradually, Sarah's trembling eased. She found herself leaning closer to him, drawn by his warmth and solidity. Nathaniel did not move away. When another crash of thunder shook the cabin, Sarah's hand found his without conscious thought, and his fingers closed around hers, strong and reassuring. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, watching the fire while the storm raged outside. Sarah was intensely aware of everywhere their bodies were close, shoulder to shoulder, thigh to thigh, hands intertwined. Her heart was racing, but not from fear of the storm anymore. "Sarah," Nathaniel said finally, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, finding his gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. In the firelight, he looked almost fierce, his strong features thrown into sharp relief, but there was vulnerability there too, a hesitation she had never seen in him before. "When I offered you this work," he continued slowly, "I told myself it was just practical. I needed help. You needed a way out of a bad situation, simple business arrangement." "And now?" Sarah whispered. "Now I have to admit I was lying to myself." His hand tightened on hers. "You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing on my mind before I sleep. I find myself making excuses to be near you, to hear your voice, to see you smile. I know this is not what either of us planned, and I know you have been hurt enough by men who wanted things from you that you could not give. But I need you to know, Sarah, I have fallen in love with you. Not for what you can do for me or what you can give me, but for who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your stubborn dignity, everything about you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. "Nathaniel," she managed, her voice breaking, "I have been in love with you for weeks. I thought I was alone in feeling this way. I thought when summer ended, I would have to leave and never see you again. And it was breaking my heart." "You do not have to leave," Nathaniel said urgently. "Stay here with me. Not as an employee, but as my partner, my companion. And when your divorce is final, if you will have me, as my wife." "Yes," Sarah said, the word coming out fierce and sure. "Yes to all of it. This valley, this life. It is everything I want, everything I never knew I needed." Nathaniel cupped her face in his rough hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "I cannot promise you an easy life. Winters here are hard, and the work never ends. We will be isolated, miles from town and civilized society. You would be giving up any chance at a conventional life." "I do not want a conventional life," Sarah said. "I tried that, and it nearly destroyed me. I want this. I want you. I want to build something real and honest and true, even if it is hard, especially if it is hard, because that means it will be worth it." He kissed her then, gentle at first, almost reverent, and Sarah felt something inside her that had been frozen and broken begin to thaw and mend. She kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and fierce joy into it, her hands coming up to tangle in his long hair. The storm crashed outside, but inside the cabin there was only warmth and light and the feeling of finally coming home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this choice." "I could never regret choosing you," Sarah promised. "You saw me when I was broken and believed I was still whole. You gave me back my strength and never asked me to be anything but myself. How could I regret finding that?" They stayed awake through the storm, talking about the future they would build together. Nathaniel described his plans for the cabin, how he could add a second room, maybe a loft for storage. Sarah talked about expanding the garden, about getting chickens and maybe a milk cow. They spoke of the practical details of the life they would share, but beneath every word was the deeper current of love and commitment, of two people choosing each other despite all the reasons they should not, despite what the world might say. The storm blew itself out sometime near dawn, and they fell asleep together on the bench near the fire, wrapped in quilts, holding each other close. When Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of birdsong, she found Nathaniel already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. "Good morning," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Good morning," Sarah replied, smiling. "Is the valley still there, or did the storm wash it away? Come see." They stepped out onto the porch together, and Sarah gasped. The storm had washed everything clean, and the valley sparkled in the morning light. Raindrops glittered on every leaf and flower, and a rainbow arced across the sky, its ends touching the mountains to the east and west. The stream ran high and fast, brown with runoff, but already beginning to clear. The air smelled fresh and new, full of promise. "It is beautiful," Sarah breathed. "It is home," Nathaniel said, taking her hand. "Our home." The next weeks were among the happiest of Sarah's life. She and Nathaniel worked side by side, but now there was a new dimension to everything they did. Small touches became frequent, a hand on the small of her back as they passed each other, fingers intertwined while they sat on the porch in the evening, stolen kisses when they took a break from work. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds and hearts as thoroughly as they were learning each other's bodies through increasingly passionate embraces. Nathaniel was careful with her, always respectful of the boundaries she set, but the desire between them grew with each passing day. Sarah found herself wanting him with an intensity that sometimes shocked her. This was nothing like the dutiful submission she had offered Thomas in the early days of their marriage. This was hunger and need and joy all tangled together, a celebration of bodies and souls coming together. In early August, a rider came up from Silver Creek, bringing news and mail. Sarah's heart clenched when she recognized the official documents her divorce had been finalized. She was free. The rider, a young man named Billy, who sometimes did odd jobs for Nathaniel, eyed Sarah with open curiosity. "There is a lot of talk in town about you, madam," he said, "about you coming up here with Mr. Cross. Some folks are saying it is not proper, a woman living alone with a man like that." "A man like what?" Sarah asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Billy shifted uncomfortably. "You know, a mountain man, someone who lives rough. They say he has probably taken advantage of you, that you are up here against your will or under some kind of undue influence." Nathaniel, who had been unloading supplies from Billy's pack horse, went very still. Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw. Before he could speak, she stepped forward. "You can tell the good people of Silver Creek," Sarah said clearly, "that I am here of my own free will and sound mind. Nathaniel Cross is a better man than any I met in that town, and I am grateful every day that he gave me the opportunity to start over. Furthermore, you may inform them that as of today, I am a free woman, and if Mr. Cross will have me, I intend to marry him and make my life here in these mountains. If anyone has a problem with that, they are welcome to ride up here and discuss it with me personally. I assure you, I will have plenty to say." Billy's eyes widened. "Yes, madam, I will tell them that." After Billy rode away, Nathaniel pulled Sarah into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "You did not have to defend me like that. I am used to what people say." "Well, you should not have to be," Sarah said fiercely, "and I meant every word. I want to marry you, Nathaniel. I do not want to wait." He pulled back to look at her, his gray eyes searching her face. "Are you sure? We could take our time, make sure this is what you truly want." "I am sure," Sarah interrupted. "I have never been more sure of anything. I love you. I want to be your wife, to build a life with you here. I do not need time to know that." A slow smile spread across Nathaniel's face, transforming it from harsh to beautiful. "Then we will ride down to town tomorrow and find a preacher. I am not waiting another day longer than necessary to make you mine in every way that matters." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony in Silver Creek's small church. The minister, a kind old man named Reverend Peters, asked no questions and offered no judgments. He simply performed the ceremony, his voice strong and sure as he spoke the ancient words that bound Sarah and Nathaniel together as husband and wife. A few townspeople attended, drawn by curiosity if nothing else. Sarah saw Adelaide Hornsby and Constance Wright in the back pew, their faces tight with disapproval. But she also saw Martha Peterson, who gave her an encouraging smile, and Dr. Patterson, who nodded respectfully to both her and Nathaniel. Thomas did not attend, for which Sarah was grateful. She had no desire to see him or to have him cast his shadow over this day. When Reverend Peters pronounced them married, Nathaniel kissed her in front of God and everyone, a kiss that was both tender and possessive, claiming her as his own. Sarah kissed him back without shame or hesitation, and if some in the congregation gasped, she did not care. This man was her husband now, her partner, her love. Let them talk. They rode back to the valley that same day, not wanting to spend their wedding night in town. The ride felt different now, full of anticipation and joy. Sarah was acutely aware of the ring on her finger, a simple gold band Nathaniel had purchased from the jeweler in Silver Creek. It was not fancy, but it was solid and real, a symbol of promises made and meant. When they reached the cabin, Nathaniel dismounted and came to lift Sarah down from her horse. But instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her across the threshold, making her laugh with delight. "I know it is a small cabin and not much of a palace," he said, setting her down gently inside. "But it is ours now. You are my wife, Sarah Cross, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making you happy." "You already make me happy," Sarah said, reaching up to cup his bearded face in her hands. "Happier than I ever thought possible. Now take me to bed, husband, and show me what else you can do." Nathaniel's eyes darkened with desire, and he swept her up again, carrying her to the bed they would now share. There, in the soft light of the mountain evening, they came together as husband and wife. Nathaniel was gentle with her, patient and tender, taking his time to learn what brought her pleasure. Sarah had never known that intimacy could be like this, joyful and passionate, giving and receiving in equal measure. This was nothing like the awkward, uncomfortable encounters she'd endured with Thomas. This was right, two people loving each other completely, holding nothing back. Afterward, they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Sarah's head on Nathaniel's broad chest, listening to his heartbeat slow and steady beneath her ear. His hand stroked her hair with infinite gentleness, and Sarah felt tears slipping down her cheeks. "What is wrong?" Nathaniel asked immediately, concern in his voice. "Did I hurt you?" "No," Sarah said quickly, rising up to look at him. "No, you were perfect. Everything was perfect. I'm crying because I am happy, because I never knew I could feel this way, this complete, this loved." Nathaniel's expression softened. He pulled her down for a kiss that was sweet and slow. "I will love you every day of our lives," he promised. "Through good times and hard times, through whatever comes. You are mine now, and I'm yours." "Mine," Sarah repeated, testing the word. She liked how it felt in her mouth, the certainty of it. "I like that." "So do I," Nathaniel said, his voice deepening again as his hands began to roam her body. "In fact, I think I need to demonstrate just how much you are mine, and how much I am yours." Sarah laughed, the sound turning into a gasp as his mouth found the sensitive place below her ear. "Again? Already?" "We have 3 years of your unhappy marriage to make up for," Nathaniel murmured against her skin. "I plan to be very thorough." And he was. Summer faded into fall, the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides, the nights growing crisp with the promise of coming winter. Sarah and Nathaniel worked hard to prepare for the cold months ahead, cutting firewood and storing it in neat stacks against the cabin walls, preserving the last of the garden vegetables, hunting and smoking meat. But the work was made joyful by the love they shared, by the pleasure of working side by side toward a common goal. Sarah had never been happier or healthier. The mountain air and hard work had strengthened her body, and Nathaniel's love had healed her heart. The wounds Thomas had inflicted, the shame, the sense of failure were fading like old scars, still visible if she looked for them, but no longer painful. In October, 2 surprising things happened. The first was a letter from Nathaniel's brother, someone he had not heard from in over 5 years. The letter explained that their elderly mother had passed away, leaving her small farm in Ohio to be divided between Nathaniel and his brother. The brother offered to buy Nathaniel's share, a sum of money that would allow them to improve the cabin and buy more stock for the ranch. The second surprise came from Sarah's own body. She had missed her monthly courses, and though she was afraid to hope, afraid to let herself believe, the signs were unmistakable. She was pregnant. Sarah waited to be sure before telling Nathaniel, terror and joy warring in her heart. What if her body failed her again? What if she lost this baby as she had lost all the others? She could not bear to see disappointment in Nathaniel's eyes, to face again the crushing weight of being unable to carry a child. But as the weeks passed and the pregnancy continued, Sarah began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. She was stronger now, healthier, her body no longer worn down by stress and unhappiness. And this child had been conceived in love, not duty, created in joy rather than obligation. When she was 3 months along and beginning to show, Sarah finally told Nathaniel. They were sitting by the fire one evening, the first snow of the season falling softly outside the windows, when she took his hand and placed it on her belly. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm pregnant, about 3 months along, I think." Nathaniel went very still, his gray eyes searching her face. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be. I know that I lost babies before, that my body may not be able to carry this child to term. I know there are no guarantees, but I wanted you to know, wanted to share this with you, whatever happens." To her surprise, Nathaniel's eyes filled with tears. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Our baby. Sarah, this is the most wonderful news, but I need you to know if something happens. If we lose this child, it will not change how I feel about you. I did not marry you for children. I married you because I love you, because you are the other half of my soul. Children would be a blessing, but you are the gift I have already received." Sarah felt her own tears flowing now, tears of relief and love and gratitude. "I love you so much," she whispered. "I'm afraid, Nathaniel. I'm afraid to hope, afraid to believe this could actually happen for us." "Then I will hope and believe for both of us," Nathaniel said firmly. "And I will take care of you every step of the way. We will get through this together, just like we get through everything else." And he did. As winter settled over the valley, wrapping it in snow and silence, Nathaniel cared for Sarah with a tenderness that made her heart ache. He took over the heavier chores, insisting she rest more, bringing her tea and treating her like she was made of spun glass. At first, Sarah protested, insisting she was not an invalid, but eventually she accepted his care with grace. It came from love, from his fear of losing her or the baby, and she understood that. Besides, as the pregnancy progressed, she found she did tire more easily, did need more rest. Her body was changing, growing, creating new life, and it demanded energy and care. The winter was long but not lonely. Nathaniel had his trap lines to check, but he never went far or stayed away long. They spent the dark evenings by the fire, Nathaniel carving a cradle from smooth pine while Sarah sewed tiny garments and blankets. They talked about names and made plans for the future, for the family they hoped to build. Sometimes, in the depths of the night, Sarah would wake in fear, her hand going to her swelling belly, terrified that she would feel the cramping pain that signaled loss. But her body remained strong, the baby growing steadily, and gradually her fear gave way to cautious hope. Spring came late to the high country, but when it finally arrived, it brought a riot of wildflowers and the return of birdsong. Sarah was huge now, her belly round and tight, the baby moving constantly beneath her skin. Nathaniel would place his hand on her stomach and laugh with delight when he felt a tiny foot kick against his palm. "Strong," he would say. "Our child is strong, just like the mother." In late May, 2 weeks before the baby was due, Sarah began to feel the first contractions. She and Nathaniel had planned for this, had made arrangements for a midwife from Silver Creek to come up and stay for the last few weeks of the pregnancy. But the baby, it seemed, had its own timeline. Nathaniel rode down to town at breakneck speed, returning with the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Johnson, just as Sarah's labor began in earnest. For the next 18 hours, Sarah rode waves of pain that seemed to go on forever, clinging to Nathaniel's hands, drawing strength from his presence. Mrs. Johnson coached her through the contractions, encouraging and calm, while Nathaniel remained at her side despite the midwife's suggestion that he wait outside. "I am not leaving her," he said flatly, and Sarah loved him all the more for it. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of gold and pink, Sarah gave one final tremendous push and felt the baby slide from her body. For a moment there was silence, terrible and complete, and Sarah's heart stopped in her chest. Then a cry rang out, strong and angry, the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. "You have a son," Mrs. Johnson announced, laying the squalling infant on Sarah's chest. "A big, healthy boy." Sarah looked down at the baby in her arms, at his scrunched red face and flailing fists, at the shock of dark hair on his head, and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. A son. She had given birth to a son, and he was alive and healthy and perfect. Nathaniel stood beside the bed, tears streaming openly down his face, his hand gentle on the baby's head. "He is beautiful," he said, his voice breaking. "You did it, Sarah. You brought our son into the world." "We did it," Sarah corrected, looking up at him with eyes full of love, together like everything else. They named him Jacob, after Nathaniel's father, and he was indeed strong, with a healthy appetite and a powerful set of lungs. Sarah recovered quickly from the birth, her body bouncing back with the resilience of a woman who had been strengthened by mountain living. Nursing came easily, and she spent hours just holding Jacob, marveling at the perfect tiny human she and Nathaniel had created. Nathaniel was a natural father, patient and gentle with his son, but protective as a bear. He built Jacob a cradle that rocked smoothly, carved toys from soft wood, and sang to him in a deep rumbling voice that never failed to soothe the baby to sleep. When Jacob was a month old, they took him down to Silver Creek to be christened. The town had heard about the baby. Of course, Billy the writer had spread the news when Nathaniel had sent him down with letters announcing Jacob's birth. The reception was mixed. Some townspeople congratulated them warmly, genuinely happy for Sarah and Nathaniel. Others maintained a cold distance, still disapproving of the unconventional marriage and the wild mountain man who had claimed one of their own. Sarah did not care. She walked through town with her head high, Jacob in her arms and Nathaniel at her side, a united family. When she passed Adelaide Hornsby on the street, the older woman actually stopped her. "I heard you had a son," Adelaide said, her voice stiff. "I did," Sarah replied evenly. "A healthy, strong boy." Adelaide looked at Jacob, and something flickered in her eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps grudging respect. "They said you could not have children. They said you were barren." "They were wrong," Sarah said simply. "Or perhaps I just needed the right circumstances, the right partner. Either way, I have been blessed beyond measure, and I am grateful for it every day." She walked on, leaving Adelaide standing in the street, and did not look back. The christening went smoothly, Reverend Peters welcoming Jacob into the church with the same kindness he had shown at Sarah and Nathaniel's wedding. Afterward, Martha Peterson approached them, her kind face beaming. "I am so happy for you," she said, peering at Jacob with grandmotherly affection. "You look well, Sarah. Mountain life clearly agrees with you." "It does," Sarah agreed. "I have never been happier or healthier. The mountains healed me in ways I did not even know I needed." "And Mr. Cross?" Martha asked, glancing at Nathaniel, who stood nearby talking to Dr. Patterson. "Is he a good husband to you?" Sarah smiled, her whole heart in it. "The best husband I could ever have asked for. He loves me for who I am, not for what I can give him. He sees me as a partner, an equal. Every day with him is a gift." Martha nodded, satisfied. "That is all that matters then. Pay no mind to the gossips. They will always find something to talk about, but you have built yourself a good life. Hold on to it." They rode back to their valley that evening, Jacob sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. The sun was setting over the western peaks, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Sarah looked at the mountains rising all around them, at the valley spread out below, at Nathaniel riding strong and sure beside her, and felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was home. Not just the place, but the life they had built together, the family they had created. It had not come easily. She had traveled through heartbreak and loss to get here, but that only made it more precious. She had learned that strength came not from never falling, but from rising every time you were knocked down. She had learned that love was not about meeting someone else's expectations, but about finding someone who loved you for your true self. And she had learned that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of your life began at the point where you thought everything had ended. The years that followed were full and rich. Jacob grew into a sturdy, adventurous boy who loved the mountains as much as his father did. Nathaniel taught him to track and hunt, to read the weather and respect the wild. Sarah taught him to read and write, to tend the garden and cook, to appreciate beauty in all its forms. When Jacob was 3, Sarah gave birth to twin daughters, Anna and Marie, who arrived squalling into the world on a snowy December night. Nathaniel handled the double blessing with his usual calm, simply building 2 more cradles and rocking both babies to sleep each night while singing off-key lullabies. 2 years later came another son, Daniel, quiet and thoughtful, where Jacob was boisterous and bold. And finally, when Sarah was 32 and thought their family complete, she gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Nathaniel's first wife. It felt right to honor that memory, to acknowledge that the love Nathaniel had lost had shaped him into the man Sarah loved. The cabin grew along with the family, Nathaniel adding rooms and a second story, building a real ranch house that could accommodate their expanding brood. They acquired more stock horses and cattle, chickens and pigs, turning the small homestead into a working ranch. It was hard work, but they thrived on it, teaching their children the value of labor and the satisfaction of building something with your own hands. Sometimes, people from Silver Creek would ride up to visit, usually in summer when the trails were clear. Some came out of curiosity, wanting to see how the scandalous couple had fared. They found a thriving family and a prosperous ranch, and many left shaking their heads in wonder. Others came seeking Nathaniel's help. He had a reputation as the best tracker in Montana Territory, and desperate people often sought his aid in finding lost children or tracking criminals. Nathaniel always helped when he could, though he never stayed away from home longer than necessary. His family was his anchor, and he guarded their time together fiercely. Sarah occasionally heard news from town about Thomas. He had remarried within a year of their divorce, a young woman barely 20. The marriage had produced 2 children in quick succession, but by all accounts it was not a happy union. Thomas had become harder, more bitter, drinking too much and running the ranch into debt. Sarah felt no satisfaction in his unhappiness, only a distant sadness for the life they had both wasted trying to force something that was never meant to be. As for herself, Sarah had never been happier. Yes, there were hard times, winters when the snow piled high and supplies ran low, illnesses that terrified her, the constant worry that came with raising 5 children in wild country. But through it all, she and Nathaniel faced everything together, their love the bedrock on which everything else was built. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathaniel took Sarah up to a high meadow he had discovered, a secret place where wildflowers bloomed in incredible profusion and a waterfall tumbled down from the rocks above. They left the children with a trusted neighbor and rode up as they had that first summer, just the 2 of them and the mountains. They spread a blanket in the meadow and sat watching the sunset over the peaks. Nathaniel pulled Sarah close, her back against his broad chest, his arms wrapped around her. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Giving up the chance at a conventional life? You could have gone to a city, found work, maybe eventually married someone respectable." Sarah turned in his arms to look at him, reaching up to trace the strong lines of his face. Gray was beginning to show in his dark hair and beard, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting against mountain sun and snow. He was 40 now, still strong and vital, but marked by time and weather. He had never looked more beautiful to her. "Regret it?" she repeated. "Nathaniel, marrying you and building this life was the best decision I ever made. You gave me everything I needed when I had lost everything I thought I wanted. You showed me that strength is not about meeting other people's expectations, but about being true to yourself. You loved me when I felt unlovable, believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. How could I possibly regret that?" "I just want you to be happy," Nathaniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want you to have the life you deserve." "I have exactly the life I deserve," Sarah said firmly. "I have you and our children and this beautiful place. I have work that satisfies me and challenges I can meet. I have love and purpose and joy. What more could anyone want? Nathaniel kissed her then, long and deep, a kiss that held 10 years of shared joys and sorrows, of passion and partnership, of two souls so thoroughly entwined they had become one. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Sarah Cross. I loved you the moment I saw you crying in that alley, looking lost and broken but still defiant. I loved you when you climbed on that horse and rode into the unknown with me. I loved you through every day of these 10 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left. Forever, Sarah whispered. Love me forever, Nathaniel, because that is how long I will love you. They made love there in the meadow as the stars came out overhead, claiming each other again with the passion that had never diminished despite the years and the children and the daily demands of ranch life. Afterward, wrapped in blankets in each other's arms, they talked about the future they would continue building together. Jacob will be ready to start taking on more responsibility soon, Nathaniel mused. The boy has a real talent for working with horses. We should think about expanding that part of the ranch, breeding quality stock. And Anna wants to learn how to tan hides properly, Sarah added. She has been watching you work and asking questions. I think she has your practical nature. She has her mother's stubborn determination, Nathaniel countered with a smile. All of them do, which is exactly what they will need to make their way in this world. They fell silent, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. An owl hooted from the forest, and somewhere distant a wolf howled, its voice lonely and wild. But Sarah felt no fear, only contentment. This was her world now, these mountains and forests, this wild, beautiful country that asked so much and gave so much in return. Do you remember what the women in town used to say? Sarah asked suddenly. That I could not give Thomas the strong sons he needed. I remember, Nathaniel said, his voice hardening slightly at the memory. Thus, they were wrong about so many things, Sarah continued. Wrong that I was barren, wrong that my worth was measured by children, wrong that I needed their approval or their pity. But most of all, they were wrong because they thought sons were what mattered most, as if daughters were somehow less valuable, as if the measure of a woman was in the sons she bore rather than the person she became. You have given me strong sons, Nathaniel said quietly, and strong daughters. But more than that, you have given me partnership and love, companionship and joy. You have made our home a place of warmth and laughter, taught our children to be kind and brave and true. Those things matter more than any number of sons ever could. Sarah smiled in the darkness, her heart full. They gossiped that a mountain man wanted only my love, as if that were somehow shameful or wrong, as if love were not the most valuable thing anyone could offer or receive. But they were right about one thing: you did want my love, and I wanted yours. Everything else, all the blessings we have received, came from that foundation. Still does, Nathaniel agreed. Will always. They rode back down to the cabin as dawn was breaking, returning to the cheerful chaos of their children and the endless demands of ranch life. But Sarah carried the peace of that night with her, the reaffirmation of everything they had built together. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of mountain seasons and the growing of children. Jacob, at 18, was nearly as tall as his father and just as strong, with the same quiet competence and dry humor. He had started courting a girl from town, a spirited young woman named Lucy, who was not afraid of hard work or remote mountain living. The twins, Anna and Marie, were 15 and becoming young women. Anna practical and adventurous like her father, Marie artistic and dreamy, always drawing or writing poetry about the mountains she loved. Daniel, at 13, had his mother's gentle nature and a gift for working with animals. He could calm the wildest horse or befriend the most skittish calf, and Elizabeth, at 8, was a perfect combination of both parents, tough and tender, wild and wise. Sarah, at 37, still rose each morning grateful for the life she had been given. Her body bore the marks of childbearing and hard work, stretch marks and calluses, lines around her eyes, and silver threading through her dark hair. But she was strong and healthy, her hands capable, her heart full. Nathaniel, at 47, remained the solid center of their world. His hair and beard were more gray than dark now, and his face was weathered by years of mountain living, but his strength had not diminished. If anything, the years had added wisdom and patience to his natural capabilities. He was a respected figure in the territory now, known for his fairness and his skill, called upon to settle disputes and track criminals. But he never let anything keep him from his family for long. Sarah and the children were his priority, the reason for everything he did. One evening in late summer, when the valley was golden with late sunlight and the children were scattered doing their various chores, Sarah and Nathaniel sat on the porch together as they had done countless times before. Nathaniel was carving a new handle for an axe, his large hands moving with practiced precision. Sarah was mending a shirt, her needle flashing in and out of the fabric. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had stayed in Silver Creek?" Nathaniel asked suddenly. "If you had gone through with the divorce but stayed in town, tried to build a life there?" Sarah considered the question seriously, setting down her mending. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted, "but I cannot really imagine it. That Sarah, the one who lived in town and tried so hard to fit into the mold everyone expected, she feels like a different person now. A stranger." "You were never meant for that life," Nathaniel said. "I knew it the moment I saw you. You had too much fire in you, too much strength. You just needed the right place to let it out." "And the right person to see it," Sarah added, reaching over to take his hand. "You saw me, Nathaniel. Not what I could not do, not what I had failed at, but who I actually was. That was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." From inside the cabin came the sound of Elizabeth practicing her letters, reading aloud in her high, clear voice. Daniel was singing to the horses in the stable, his voice carrying across the yard. The twins were laughing about something in the garden, and Jacob was chopping wood with the steady rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat. This, Sarah thought, was what happiness sounded like. Not the absence of trouble or the presence of luxury, but the everyday music of a life well lived, of work done with purpose and love freely given and received. "I am glad you found me in that alley," Sarah said quietly. "Glad you took a chance on a broken woman with nothing to offer but herself." "You were never broken," Nathaniel corrected gently. "Battered maybe, wounded certainly, but never broken. And you had everything to offer: courage and determination, kindness and strength. I was the lucky one, Sarah. I was the one who had given up on finding love again, who thought I would spend my life alone in these mountains. Then you rode up here on that chestnut mare, scared but determined, and you changed everything." "We changed everything," Sarah said, "together." As the sun set behind the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of fire, Sarah leaned her head on Nathaniel's shoulder and felt the profound satisfaction of a life lived fully and without regret. She had traveled through darkness to reach this light, through loss to find this abundance, through judgment and shame to discover her own worth. The mountain man had wanted only her love, the gossips had said, as if that were somehow insufficient. But they had been wrong. Love had been everything, the foundation on which she and Nathaniel had built a life, raised a family, created a legacy that would outlast them both. Their children would carry forward the lessons they had learned here in this valley, that strength came in many forms, that worth was inherent rather than earned, that the greatest gift you could give another person was to see and love them for exactly who they were. Sarah smiled as Nathaniel's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. She had given him strong sons, yes, but she had also given him strong daughters. And he had given her something far more valuable than approval or acceptance. He had given her freedom. Freedom to be herself, to discover her own strength, to live a life of purpose and passion. The gossips of Silver Creek had been scandalized by their unconventional union, had predicted it would fail, had whispered that a mountain man and a divorced woman could never build anything lasting. But here they sat, 15 years after that first meeting in an alley, surrounded by the fruits of their love children and home, partnership and joy. Let them gossip, Sarah thought. Let them say what they would. She knew the truth. She knew what she and Nathaniel had built together, and it was more solid and enduring than anything the judgmental citizens of Silver Creek could comprehend. As darkness settled over the valley and the stars began to appear overhead, Nathaniel stood and offered Sarah his hand. "Come to bed, wife," he said, his voice warm with promise. "Tomorrow will come early, and there's always work to be done." "Always," Sarah agreed, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. but tonight is ours." They walked into the cabin together, past the children settling down for sleep, into the room they shared. And there, in the darkness filled with the familiar sounds and sense of home, they came together once more with the passion and tenderness that had sustained them through 15 years of marriage and would carry them through whatever years remained. Sarah fell asleep in Nathaniel's arms, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, living exactly the life she was meant to live. She had been told she could not give a man the sons he needed, that her worth was measured by her fertility, that her failure as a wife made her a failure as a woman. But she had proven them all wrong. Not by having children, though she had been blessed with 5 beautiful, healthy children, but by discovering that her worth had never depended on anyone else's expectations or approval. She was valuable because she existed, because she chose to live with courage and love, because she had refused to let heartbreak define her. And Nathaniel, the mountain man who supposedly wanted only her love, had shown her that love was not a consolation prize or a lesser goal. Love was everything. It was the soil in which all other blessings grew, the foundation on which a life could be built, the light that illuminated even the darkest valleys. Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting in these wild mountains, a family built on respect and partnership, a home filled with laughter and purpose, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. Their children would tell their own children about the grandmother who had been judged and cast aside, and the grandfather who had seen her true worth when no one else would. They would tell the story of love that triumphed over judgment, of strength that emerged from hardship, of a life reclaimed and rebuilt into something more beautiful than anyone had imagined possible. And perhaps, Sarah thought as sleep claimed her, perhaps their story would give hope to other women who found themselves broken and discarded, who believed the lies society told about their worth. Perhaps someone would hear about the woman who could not give her husband sons and the mountain man who loved her anyway, and they would understand that their value did not depend on meeting anyone else's expectations. Perhaps they would learn, as Sarah had learned, that the greatest strength came not from conforming to others' demands, but from having the courage to be yourself, to choose your own path, to build a life based on your own values rather than society's rules. These were the thoughts that carried Sarah into sleep, wrapped in her husband's arms, surrounded by her children, safe in the home they had built together in the wild Montana mountains. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every day did. But whatever came, she and Nathaniel would face it together, united by a love that had proven stronger than judgment, more enduring than hardship, more powerful than any obstacle placed in their path. The mountain man had wanted only her love, and she had given it freely, receiving his in return, and together they had created a legacy that would outlast them, both a legacy not of sons or wealth or social standing, but of love and courage and the indomitable strength of the human spirit. It was more than enough. It was everything.